name is Heinrich Jessen. I'm the chairman of Jebsen Jessen here in Singapore. And the Jebsen Jessen group here is part of a wider family enterprise, which started 128 years ago. So I'm third generation. And normally at 128 years, you would be probably in the fifth generation. But in our case, it's actually only the third because of a generational jump, the youngest child and the youngest child once again. So I joined 28 years ago, actually exactly when the company was 100 years I joined. And I started in a role, and maybe we'll talk a bit about that later as well, in environment, health and safety, which was in a way the toolbox that I had when I joined the business. I did that for a couple of years and then sort of went through the group. We're quite a diversified group here in Southeast Asia. Worked in the packaging business for a while. I did some projects in the headquarters. And then I ran our material handling business for about 5 years before coming back to the head office and then taking over as chairman, which is now 15 years ago. It's an interesting history. It started when two very young men, they were in their 20s, got together in Hong Kong and started a trading business. Both of them were not from Hong Kong. They were from what is today southern Denmark. And they both came from seafaring families. So their ancestors were ship captains and ship owners who sailed all over the world in the early and mid 1800s, trading. So trading European products in Asia, trading Asian products within Asia, and sailing back, bringing Asian products back to Europe. And this went on over several generations, and these two young men came from those families and decided that they would follow in the same footsteps in being active in Asia, but they would trade not with Asia, but actually in Asia, and therefore set up a trading company in Hong Kong, 1895, and began business basically looking for wherever there was demand for products in China coming from Europe, or the other way around, wherever there was demand, wherever they could source supply, they tried to meet that demand. So it was very immediately very diversified. Any opportunity that came, they would go after it. So the business evolved and grew quite nicely. Then came World War I. Now, I mentioned earlier they were from what is today southern Denmark, but this is actually a border region. And the border has gone north-south over many centuries. And at the time when they started the company, they were actually German citizens, because that particular town where they were from was part of Germany. So they were finding themselves as German citizens in what was then a British crown colony. And in World War I, that meant that they were enemies, essentially. So one of the two happened to be in Germany when the war broke out, but the other one was less lucky and was actually arrested and brought to Australia into internment. And all the assets were taken, the ships were taken, the officers, etc. So the business came to an almost complete standstill. After the war, the two got back together again, regrew the business. Meanwhile, the second generation started. So the first of four in the second generation, two sons each, joined the business. My uncle Heinrich Jessen survived his uncle, survived his father as well, and then ultimately took over the business. In 1920, there was a plebiscite in this part of Denmark where they were from, and the people voted that it would revert back to Denmark. So he was a Danish citizen when the Second World War broke out, and therefore this time it wasn't all taken away. However, the World War still had a big impact, and he actually moved the headquarters from Hong Kong to Shanghai. Hong Kong was occupied by the Japanese. He moved to Shanghai, in a way survived the war, but was very ill and died from cancer at the age of 41 in 1944. On his deathbed, hands over the business to his younger cousin, Michael Jebsen, who, again, they're all very young, so he was only in his 20s. He took over the business and again had to grow the business basically from scratch. Did so during the 50s, brought his younger brother, Jacob, and their cousin, Arvid Peter Jessen, into the business. And then the three of them again enjoyed tremendous growth during the 1950s. The growth came but it was still a relatively small company. They were all sitting in one office in Hong Kong. They all had strong personalities, and so they didn't always see eye to eye. And in a way, there was a degree of conflict, and they decided to split the roles, but they were wise enough to remain as shareholders. So one returned to Denmark and ran the what was still left of the shipping business. One stayed in Hong Kong, and then one came down to Singapore to replicate the model that had worked as a trading company in China in Southeast Asia. And so that gave rise to the second group, which I'm today the chairman of, headquartered in Singapore and focusing on Southeast Asia. Both groups, plus another trading group headquartered in Hamburg, Germany, grew and thrived through the 60s, 70s, 80s, survived the Asian financial crisis. Meanwhile, we're in the third generation, and a fourth pillar joined about 30 years ago in the form of GMA Garnet, which is today the world's largest garnet business, a mining, processing, distribution, recycling business in Garnet, which we'll talk about a bit more today. So these four groups today form the family enterprise. We're today in the third generation and still 100% family owned.